what I've got here, and you can have a chance to look at these later. Each set of these deep soil cores here on the left-hand side is unimproved soil. It's been in a no-till corn soybean rotation without annual ryegrass or any cover crop. The other side has the ryegrass in it and the cover crop. So if I think even back there in the shade you can see that. Can you see the difference between these two from there?
This is
So
slick in that name.
yeah, so over here you'll notice that we've got darker soil that goes down compared to here, where we kind of start to get light here. We've got this, and then if we look in the down below, you can really tell the difference of where that fragipan is. So you might guess that we'd have a mowing crew come in. So later on, if you want to look at these things, the best way to feel where the fragipan is, take a knife, and I'll leave this up here, and you can just kind of start to poke that down, and you'll get to a point down here where the knife will almost bounce off of it if these things would dry. Where over here, where we've got the darker soils, look at this, the top part of that, and that hasn't been tilled in about 10 years, versus this, and you can just see there's a difference there in how that works. So what we've found, and in working with the USDA, they don't have the access to our fragipan soils here. So I'd set up this project a few years ago, and they set up water stations in that with deep, kind of like a lightsaber type thing that was 40 inches deep. And we had water probes that measured the water that was available for crop use every 6 inches up that 40 inches. And what we found was, in every case, we had a lot better water infiltration of the water, so that meant that we had less runoff and we had more available water for the soil. And we also had a deeper rooting system with this. And we can see this too, because if you come up later on and you tear these things apart, in the bottom of the improved soil with the ryegrass, it's not uncommon to have deep roots that will be broken off in the bottom of these cores 40 inches down. And in the other parts of it, you'll rarely find a root that is below that fragipan. Every once in a while there's a crack in it. It's not like the fragipan is a solid asphalt type of a road down into the soil. There will be breaks through it, but we'll see good rooting down to 40 or 50 inches. Junior Upton over in Hamilton County that Mike Plummer and I have worked with for a long time, and Mike started out with him at doing the original annual ryegrass roots over there, but you can see that it's actually changed the horizons of the soil. So if we look at the no cover crop on the left and with the cover crop on the right, and that's with annual ryegrass, you can see how these bars are a little bit different. And with the cover crop, each one of these soil layers is deeper from the top. So that means that we've expanded or increased the soil, topsoil layers, and we have broken up this fragipan and moved that down. And you can kind of see it in these things. And then we've got we have documented that we've seen higher yields in about every case with this, but those yields aren't better every year. Every year we've got certain conditions that are going to benefit more either a no-till cover crop system or a conventional tillage system. So, and somebody's always got to be the winner, but through the course of this time, we've seen consistent times when our yields are as good or better with a well-managed cover crop system as they are without. And I think that's key is the management of it, because we can go out and we can plant a cover crop, or we can recommend that people plant a certain cover crop, but it's all in the management of how we deal with that, on getting it planted in time, What's the ratio of our mix? Do we have some cereal rye in there? Cereal rye is great, and it probably should be used on every acre of cover crops that we grow in Southern Illinois anyway, but that's not the only thing. We can mix other things in there to get the benefit out of the cereal rye, but not have it be a death blow to our corn like it is if we just plant it out there and then we think, well, yeah, let's go and plant corn into that. Well, we need to have a plan to make that work, and all of that starts about this time of the year. And this year is going to be a challenge too, because we've got a lot of late planted crops. We've got weed problems that are coming up, and the tendency is going to be there to put on a heavy shot of residual with any post application, especially if we make in our beans right now. And those midsummer residual herbicide applications are things that do a very good job of controlling the good parts of our cover crop mix, like our clovers, the rape seeds, and annual ryegrass that we need to do this. So it's all a balancing act, and this year is going to be a challenge more than usual, but we need to just keep that in mind. Another thing that on the herbicide end of things, I think that in my observation has been the biggest obstacle to good cover crop research that demonstrates success and well-managed systems in the state of Illinois anyway, because we get research projects funded this time of year, and then we have researchers go and they will plant a cover crop into bean stubble with the right mix, but that bean stubble, because it wasn't in the grant project wasn't rolling right then, that bean field hadn't been managed for the cover crop that we're planting that into. And as a result, we get a poor stand of cover crops, or we don't get any of our clovers or anything else. The researchers do a great job of the activities of the project. They do a good job of making the observations of that and reporting on that. But by not having a familiarity with the proper cover crop management leading into that, that kind of sets us up for a jaded result in the beginning. So that's one thing that we're working on to do a better job of that in now. But you don't understand that until you've lived through a couple of cycles about that. But we are improving here. So thank you, Lauren. And we'll have that thing inside that you can see it in a little bit. But I think if you just want to lay that down there, we'll be good.
Here's the difference between that sample and the next.
The whole field had cover crop on it and probably for 4 or 5 years with cereal rye before that. And then for the last 8 years, these strips have had no cover crop versus a well-managed cover crop with annual ryegrass mix on that. So this type of improvement that we've seen is within 7 or 8 years. Yeah, and that's one of the misnomers too is that all of the benefits of cover crops is a long-term thing. And yeah, 5 or 6 years is, but we've also got issues where, and I'll show this real quick here. Our winter annual weeds, resistant mare's tail is a problem if we don't, and there's a lot of fields that have a lot of mare's tail in there now, but cereal rye has been shown to effectively help reduce mare's tail pressure in the field alone. And if we think about what we're fighting with the winter annuals, our winter annual weeds are kind of sissies because they have very shallow root systems, and they do really good as there's nothing competing in there with them. But it's the competition of the rye as much as any allelopathic effect that helps to aid with some control on all of those winter annuals. So if I walk out in any of my fields now and there's these cut pans here, and you can poke around through these later on here, but all I've got growing out here is cover crop, and there's a few little oddball weeds and things, but there's virtually no mare's tail in any field that I've got cover crops on. I've got to treat my non-cover crop control strips because there's no competition in there. But I'm planting into things like this And planting into this is very manageable. We're planting corn into this with cereal rye in it that's as tall as the hood on the tractor, just isn't. So we've got some options right there. And we'll put some, Lauren, you can help me here. We'll do this. This will take just a little bit. So we've got soil from a tillage situation, and then we've got some of this no-till long-term soil here. So if we put this in this sediment tube and kind of look and see what's going on. Which side was your lighter one on? Okay, on Lauren's side, this side is the tilled soil. This is mine. Let's just rotate these around. Okay, so even from back there in the shade, what do we see going on? You know, which one of these is falling apart? It's this one. In both cases, I can see it from right there. And yeah, we've got a few clods that are falling out in this. Well, so what's this telling us? This is telling us that it's the same soil type. It was within a half mile apart, just fields that were managed differently. But we've got our soil components, our sand, silt, and clay in there. But the thing that makes the soil productive and the key to soil health is the pore space and the water holding capacity of that soil. And you can see how this is breaking up, and if we kind of jiggle that a little bit, man, that just completely explodes right there. And then this, you know, I'm like that. Yeah, we've got some bigger chunks that are falling out of that, but we don't have the cloud that's in there. And this just speaks to the fact that with reduced tillage, and with the cover crops, we've got a looser soil, so we're able to get more water into that soil, and we can hold that to have more available water for the crop. Because in a situation like this, where we've got that soil falling apart, what happens in that tilled ground after it's tilled and tilled and tilled? And there's a lot of that. I think a rotary hoe salesman probably could have had a big market here in the last 10 days and probably coming up. But with the lack of pore space, we tend to get crusting, so that means that we've got more water leaving the field through the surface, where in this field we've got more of that water staying there, and it's handled better. So just the whole dynamics of the situation is a little bit improved. So what we've got over here, we've got a water table simulator. This thing will rotate around, and we're going to put an inch of water on this. So we've got tilled ground. This is from the field that was tilled there. Hasn't had any cover crop on it. This is a field that I worked up. It has been no-tilled, and it was long-term CRP until a couple years ago. But it's worked up this year for various reasons. And then in the middle here, we've got this brown grass, and that's annual ryegrass. And if anybody hears anything about cover crop, remember annual ryegrass, you can't control it. Oh, it's terrible. Well, you can't control it because we don't have the right plan for it, okay? But I've killed it. This ryegrass was about that big when I sprayed it. This is Roundup 2,4-D, my termination mix. I terminated earlier with clethodim. Didn't have any problem with it, but there's some keys to that. This is what kind of what the residue looks in the full mix. And then this is what I've got in some of my strip tilled area where I planted the cover crop between it. There's some radishes that made it. We've got some clover, and then there's some vetch and crimson clover that's dying down there. So what we're going to do, we'll turn the water on here and we'll let this rain on it for a little bit. So these flumes here will catch the surface runoff. Will be out here in these jugs, and then if the water infiltrates through the soil, these pans are perforated underneath here, and there's a catch thing, so we'll catch the water that goes through in the bottom. So kind of keep track of how much water ends up where, and then the coloration of it. Okay. Are we on? Is it? All right, Lauren's got to stay. All right. So stand back. And if my luck holds true with the rest of the last month, when I hit this button, it's not going to do anything. So we'll throw buttons on it. But all right, hold your breath. Is the water on?
There's a underneath there.
What's that? No, don't touch that.
This is the water that goes into.
Huh?
This is the water that goes into that.
It's the pressure regulator.
Pressure regulator?
Yeah.
We got too much pressure. There you go.
There we go.
We got it.
Maybe so. All right. There we go. Look at there. It's a learning process. I guess we need to adjust this for every water supply. And that's a pretty good rain. And it's real dry, but this is great because I'm really tired. Now I can sit here and watch this rain with all of you.
Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, that'd be a good thing.
On these last 3 years, June, early July has been pretty hot with not much rain, right?
Yep.
Have you seen a decrease in plant stress in the no-till areas during those stress times versus the conventional?
Yeah, the question was, with later season heat stress and moisture stress, do we see any difference in the cover crop fields versus not? And yes, you do, but in a year like this, it's important. We got to get the crop planted before we can realize any of those benefits. So it's kind of a balancing act there. But you know, we always talk about the moisture issues with that getting to the crop, but we've got a situation where I think that as much or more than the moisture a lot of times, it's the soil temperature. Because if we've got soil that's got a mat on that early in the year, or later it's going to stay cooler. And our cooler soils, they can kind of work against us sometime for crop establishment. But once we get going from now on, cool soil temperatures are good, because if that soil heats up, and Abigail had a picture with the thermometers in her presentations a little bit ago. So once the soil temperature gets up to a certain amount, the biological activity of the soil will pretty much stop. And at that point, it doesn't matter what's going on, because when your soil biology doesn't function, your whole nutrient cycle kind of falls on its face. So that's a very important thing. All right, so we're getting a little bit of activity here. We don't quite have it set up to Hurricane 5 force. What's that?
Ratio. We have those during.
Yeah, we'd have a ratio. And this is some dry soil too. But if we just kind of look at what's happening here right off the bat, you know, you can see right here that this ground that I took out of the tilled field, and I did put it where they had some of the crusted soil that was on top. You know, the water is running off of that. And where the worked ground is here in my field, yeah, we've got some water running off of that too, but I bet you there'll be more come down. But when we get into where the ryegrass is here, and that was a real good sample there, look at how much water is running off the surface as opposed to how much is getting on the inside of the jug right here. So notice that soil is able, because of the pore space and better soil structure because of that cover crop, is able to take that water in, and it's infiltrating down deeper than our 2-inch pan, and it's getting all the way through. The same way with our full cover crop mix, you know, we've got virtually no runoff in there. And then we've got over here, we're starting to get a little bit of runoff, and it's hard to get these things lined up right, but so there we've got about 1 3/4 inches of rain on that. And think about another thing here. This is set relatively flat. how many fields do we have around within 50 miles of here that the slope on those fields is more like this than it's like this? So if we magnify that with our elevation, that's going to be another factor into that. And if we're losing our soils, the productivity of the soil kind of goes along with it. And there we're getting some. What's that?
What's your rain gauge say?
The rain gauge is right at 2 inches right now. And I think but we can kind of look there, and you know, we can see that we've got this, we're losing a lot of water running off. So many times we'll hear about, well, I got 2 inches of rain. Well, if we had 2 inches of rain that fell on the field, but an inch of it ran off, we only got an inch of rain. And if your farm is located like mine is in this area, we need all the inches of rain in the soil that we can. So if I've got a soil that's functioning like this, and this would be an Ava silt loam soil type, or a Rend is a silt loam soil type that's fairly predominant around a bigger area. But you can see how all of that water got in there. And another thing that we can look at is look at the amount of water that came through there. So if we can get this much water in the top 2 inches of this sample here, imagine how that's going to soak down into the rest of the soil profile. Where if we've got this, and let's bring our thing over here. Are you about ready to give me the hook, Stephanie?
Oh, you're good.
All right, let's do one of these. So we'll kind of be tidy here because we don't want to get kicked out of the Rend Lake Convention Center to never come back, because this is a pretty good place to have a meeting. All right. So you can see we've got our runoff there, and we've not got just a whole lot of other stuff going on. So if we kind of take this, what happens if we pour this thing out? Look at there. We don't even have that soil didn't take water in any deeper than about the top ½ inch right there.
Plant that.
Huh?
And you can plant that this afternoon.
Yeah. I would welcome that. So, but there again, you know, the advantage of not getting the water in to plant a crop might be good, or we might be able to till that and dry it out. But what damage does that do later on? And then if we look at our cover crop sample, and not everybody's growing solid ryegrass, but let's look at this. So if we take that, we pop that out, look at there, we've got moisture all the way to the bottom. Now there's some dry clods there too, but we had that water, and that was percolating through the soil. Okay, that was all taken out in one piece. It's not like we put a couple clods in there together to make that out. So that's a representative example of what the soil surface was in the field, and we've got that good of penetration through versus the majority of it running off. So I'm tired and hot. Does anybody have any questions about this, or
If you could come into the plants in the shade.
complaints, or that? Well, people can't see though. I'm good. So what?
Hey, John,
Yeah.
a lot of these cover crop fields are getting burnt off in the last week because they can't get them to dry out.
Yeah.
So what are we losing by doing so?
It's hard to tell. I mean,
Can you repeat the question?
it said that we've got cover crop fields in this area that got rank and got big, and guys are burning them off to get them planted finally. I guess that the burning issue of it is, up in the air, but then they're going to are they then no-tilling into that, or are they going in and working it because they're really mad at it? Huh?
A lot of them are trying to no-till.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if it comes to that and they were burned off, you're going to have a pretty easy experience no-tilling into that. You're going to have the benefit of those decaying cover crop roots there, so your water infiltration is going to be better. But where you're going to miss out is later on in the summer. You're not going to have that protective cover, so you're going to be open to erosion potential. And then that also leads to the fact that you're not going to be able to keep as much water in because the water is going to run off faster. And then when the soils really start to warm up, and especially if we've got black residue that's burned on there, those soils are going to heat up, so the soil temperature is going to get up, and that's going to impact our biological activity. But we got to make things work, and there's great things. But if anything, I would just encourage you to think about, instead of saying, well, my cover crops were a disaster, or my neighbor down the road, he had terrible luck with that, and think about some of the good things. Because I wish we could have this at my farm, not to see any great example of any crop that I've got grown, but the way that the cover crops performed, as far as in my cover crop fields, all I've got growing is cover crop material. I know how to control that. I don't have any of the mare's tail. There's virtually no water hemp coming into it until I run a planter through it. So it's just sitting there waiting, but yet I had a mix that was planted. I've got this stuff growing down below the cereal rye. It's not just a cereal rye environment. And I think that's the big thing is that if we can do a better job of establishing and setting up to establish the cover crop to where we can get this. And we don't need to have a whole lot of it, but just that different dynamic with the carbon nitrogen ratio versus a solid seeding of cereal rye once it gets big, that just opens us up to a lot of opportunity to manage this differently and still maintain the benefits that we get out of this. But if you look, and it's getting hot here, but on the top, and this field is dry, and the green cover crop that I've got going, that helped to dry it out, no doubt. But the top of it, that soil, it doesn't clod, it just falls apart. It's loose. You can even pull some roots, and these clods that you see on that's not nodulation, that's soil aggregates that are on there. So if we've got that soil that's clumping there, that just helps to get the water into the soil better and manage it better. Anything else? We don't want to belay things. Yeah.
We see the benefits of what it does for soil improvement, but there's also the nutritional challenges. How do you overcome the fact you're pulling the PK out, putting it back on top, going corn after beans? Now we need a split out to even get anywhere close to the yield we're going to get, without doing a double application on the fertility part. And then the other question I have is, over time, what are we seeing the increase in disease on all these soil-borne diseases that are sitting there in that garbage that's sitting on top, that's in the refuge? Like, is this going to increase our tar spot problem? Is this going to increase our red crown rot disease? Because those things are overwintering the residues.
That's a fair question. The question was, what about all the negative impacts of this, depending on nutrient balance and those types of things? I guess my question would be on the nutrient side of things. There's hundreds, if not thousands, of pounds of phosphorus and potassium in our soils that's available and largely unavailable in a lot of cases. Any of our plants, they're not just surviving on the fertilizer that we apply. They're able, through root interactions and some of the acidic changes with the root exudates and that type of thing, are able to bring some of that locked in nutrients out to supplement our applied fertilizer. So it's not a black and white situation there. And if I've got nutrients that are held in plant material like this, as that decay, this stuff is going to decay within the growing season, so it's going to cycle back in. So it's not like it's a net loss. It's different when we have the cereal rye that gets big, because anytime you've got green material like this, well, I poured that out, but you know, the cereal rye part, when we've got the cereal rye straw that forms, any nutrients that are held in the lignin part of that straw are held very tightly. So it's going to take quite a bit to get that cycled back, but yet they're still in the system. So yeah, in year 1 or 2, we might see some things, but if I've got cereal rye out there for 4 years, or you know, less than that even, that's at various stages of decay, we're going to get to an equilibrium there to where we're never going to know about that. Another thing with the split application, what was your...
Well, just if you're going corn after beans, you know, you're pulling that nitrogen out, and some of the research I've seen shows that you almost have to guarantee doing a split app drop, Y drop or something.
Okay, I would say that that's not right.
That goes to the University of Missouri.
Well, that's in Missouri. We grow stuff different here. I'm kidding. All right, let's talk about that. Because along with being the cover crop guy, I won't say a guru or anything, but I also run the nitrogen trials for NREC through the Fertilizer and Chemical Association in this bigger region here. I hear constantly that we cannot grow corn with cover crops and cereal rye in the mix and everything because of that. If you'll notice this graph here, this shows a whole bunch of lines. Each one of these is a response curve for a field in that year. The thing to look at here is that we've got a whole bunch of them clustered down here, and then we've got this response curve that's way up high here. So that field that's an outlier, it had the highest yield and it had the lowest optimum nitrogen rate after the first of the year, and it was a cover crop field. But it was a managed cover crop field. As far as the nitrogen management goes in corn, we don't find that it takes any extra nitrogen, or it shouldn't, to grow corn in a cover crop system, or even if cereal rye is in the mix. Now, you know, we don't want to plant corn in a solid stand of cereal rye that's as tall as a hood on your tractor. We want to manage that before. Rye is very good at taking nutrients out, because that's where it fits into our nutrient loss reduction strategy. So these graphs here show what the fall planting date has on the effectiveness of cereal rye to be able to take out the nutrients. So basically what this is saying, the earlier we get our cereal rye planted, the more growth we're going to get in the fall and the more nutrients it's going to take up. That just goes to reason. But the key to growing corn, in whether no-till or cover crop, isn't zeroing in on the total amount, it's the timing of delivery on that. We have got to have an early supply of corn, and I think it would help even in a lot of our conventional ground, because how many times do we go out and we get a window to plant in early April, and we'll get the corn that'll be up, have 2 or 3 leaves on it, and then it will get a 2 or 3 inch rain, and then it'll stay cool for the rest of the month. We'll grow that corn developing in cool, wet soils, and you can even have a full amount of anhydrous on there, but if those corn roots aren't able to access that because it's every 30 inches across the field, we don't do that. So we need to have either starter fertilizer that we're putting on with the planter. Realize that not everybody has that, and not everybody's going to do it, but you can easily replace that with some broadcast urea and ammonium sulfate in the spring. And I would think that if I was in the retail business and advising any farmer that was planting corn in southern Illinois, I would want to have them have on at least 70 pounds of nitrogen at planting that was available to the corn. Because if we're thinking about planting it and then getting on some early side dress and then coming back with Y drops or some kind of aerial application, that is not going to get the results that we need. We've got to have that early nitrogen. So as long as we have that on ahead of time, that the plant's able to access and coming up through that eliminates about 75% of those nutrient issues that we've got, just having that early supply right there. So, and as far as any benefit on a split application or an extra late application, unless we have a soil that is sand or conducive to a lot of nitrogen loss fast, those late season applications really isn't it's good to have the technology and the equipment to do that as a rescue, but I want to have all my nitrogen on my corn by the time it's shoulder high. And if we've got the 75 pound nitrogen range with all of the nitrogen studies that we did at Dixon Springs while I was there, and even the data that Ebelhair had when I was there, and it holds the same thing at Champaign. As long as any trial that we had on 70 pounds, we were able to take corn to about shoulder high. And then, so that buys us some flexibility if we're a little bit late getting our side dress, or if we're really late and we need to go in at later Y drop or something. 70 pounds will take it for a long way. So if we're planting corn with less than 70 pounds, I think that we're setting ourselves up for a challenge more years than not that we're not going to come back to, no matter how much we put on later on. So that's the long and the short of it. It's not extra or more. It's, the timing and the placement of it is the big thing that we found time and time again.
Yeah, I think we're gonna take a break now.
Yeah.